Hello, this is IP Stories by 4IP Council, a podcast about innovation and intellectual property. Join us and you'll hear about the journeys through invention, creation, and IP understanding of our guests.
This episode is part of a tech transfer special, a series of interviews to better understand the transfer of knowledge from research centers, universities, and laboratories to the industry and our lives.
I'm Fernanda.
And I'm Marta, and today we are happy to welcome to our podcast Paul Van Zandt. Paul, thank you so much for having this chat with us. Um, would you like, first of all, tell our listeners about yourself and your career?
When I hear the word career, it always sounds to me as something that is planned and forecasted in a very planned way. That actually was absolutely not the case in my own case. To start with, when I was contemplating which studies I would like, I was hesitating quite some time between medical doctor, law school, architect, economy. At the end of the day, I went for law school, and that was supplemented a couple of years later by business administration. My first job was at KPMG, which is a consulting company. I really liked it. At a given point in time, I got a little bit nervous by the fact that as a consultant, you give input, but you're not in charge of things. You don't know what's happening with them, whether your advice is followed or not. And around that period, I was approached by a headhunter who had a certain job offer, which seemed okay to me. When talking to that headhunter after a couple of minutes, it appeared that the job that he was talking about was not the job that he approached me for, but something completely different, namely a job in an investment company, a private equity company. To cut a long story short, that finally was the job that I was interested in. I worked for a couple of years there, and then after several years, I got a question from my predecessor here at the university whether I would be interested to join the tech transfer office of the university. Um, at first, I was quite reluctant because coming from private industry, um, not knowing the university from inside out, I had the impression wrongly that it was a very big and slow organization. So I thought, well, that's definitely not something for me. But after getting to know the university a little bit better, I took the jump, and here we are, 23 years later.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that you were interested in so many things before actually choosing your studies. I think that's a very good approach, and it means that yeah, like you are interested in so many different fields. The job is actually perfect.
It is for the simple reason that it is a very big green field. There are so much different aspects, so much different technologies. Almost every day, something else is happening. So a broad interest is not only useful, but I would even say is an absolute requirement to like this job.
So, I have some data here that I would like to share with our listeners before my next question. Each year, about 200 findings are reported by researchers from the KU Leuven Association to your IP department. From these findings in 2022, 144 patents were granted, resulting in a total of 825 active patent families in KU Leuven's portfolio. What do you think is the key that has made KU Leuven be considered such an innovative university?
Um, it all starts with good science. I mean, without that clay, that's the clay we have to work with. Without that material, we would not have a job. It's as simple as that. So,
Mhm.
excellent science is the starting point of everything. Um, what also has helped is in the 90s, most continental European countries implemented legislation that every university had three missions, not two, research and education, but three, research, education, and bringing the research results into society. What has
Hmm.
helped over here is that our university did not wait until the mid 90s, but our office actually was already created in 1972. So last year
Wow.
we celebrated our 50th anniversary. And that means that within our university, already for decades, not only it is appreciated if a researcher is making efforts to bring research results to society. There are signs explicitly and implicitly that the university appreciates that kind of activity, but it also means that already for decades, our university has been investing in our tech transfer office,
Hmm.
making sure that there is a solid and professional support. Um, that has helped, surely. Um, Also, the fact that we have a pretty good system of gap funding, partially funded by the university and partially funded by the government, which means that we have, like most other universities, a lot of good stuff on the shelf that is just too early to be of interest to market players, but maybe
Hmm.
just too late to be basic research. Yeah. So having some means in order to bridge that gap has been proven to be extremely useful. No doubt that has helped us also. Um, and I think, last but not least, the fact that we have implemented within the university, without going in too much details, but we have implemented quite some structures that enable researchers also to work in an interdisciplinary way across the barriers of faculties and departments, so that they can, regardless of what research segment they are working in, that they can have a common place, virtual, a common place where they can work together, have a joint budget, hire people together, again, through the barriers of faculties and departments. And there is no such thing as a one size fits all. I mean, the recipe that has worked here in our university might not do the trick elsewhere, but at least these are the elements that have helped us in our university to a great extent.
Absolutely. And I believe that the the last point that you mentioned, it's really important because it allows researchers, and correct me if I'm wrong, to exchange knowledge as well.
Absolutely. And if I take a look at the really significant breakthroughs over the last, I would say, 7, 8 years, more and more you can see the importance of interdisciplinary research. The era where the very wise professor, the very wise researcher, is thinking in his own on his own without too much interaction with other parties, and then making a great invention. These days are gone, I think.
Mhm. I would like to follow up on this with a question regarding the University Tech Transfer Office. So, based on these goals that the universities now have and that KU Leuven has been leading on for quite a while, what do you think should be the main objective of a University Tech Transfer Office? And with what metrics would you measure the success of moving towards these objectives?
Mhm. Without wanting to be too mushy or too naive, but I'm absolutely convinced that the mission of a tech transfer office should be to make the world a better place. Yeah. I'm not naive in this, but how can we try to do so? That is to bring research results into practice, making sure that they are used in society. A very interesting question is, when have you done a good job in doing so? In other words, how can you measure it? Well, that's the same question. How can you measure whether you have made the world a better place? There is an eternal debate on the KPIs that need to be used, and there's nothing wrong with KPIs, but measuring to what extent you have created impact is not a binary thing. Yeah? And the problem with a lot of KPIs, or actually the problem with most KPIs, is a KPI is an indicator. It indicates that you are doing something with a certain effect. But the problem with a lot of indicators is that they become goals in themselves. Yeah? They become, let me give an example. Creating spinouts. There are a lot of metrics that can be used to see whether or not you're successful in that. First of all, the number of spin-outs. How much of them have you created? Well, creating a spin-out is not that difficult. The problem is, or the issue is, what is happening with that spin-out after a couple of years? What's the result? Yeah. You can measure employment, but you have a lot of very successful spin-outs that don't have a huge employment. You can measure capital attracted by the spin-out. Well, you don't need to attract a lot of capital as an absolute condition to be successful. There are quite some, for example, software driven spin-outs that are very successful without attracting a lot of capital. So the point I'm making is every such indicator is an indication, but you need to take a look at all the indicators at once and complement that also with stories. Yeah? To what extent with examples, with stories. If you go if you come and visit our office, you will see in the corridors, in the meeting rooms, a lot of examples of products and services that are used on a daily basis in society that stem from the university. Well, it's very difficult to measure that with a certain KPI, but these things can complement the KPI. So I'm a firm believer of a broad set of KPIs, not to be a goal in itself, but as an indicator, complemented with impact stories, storytelling, etc.
I think looking at a bigger picture, how this is contributing to society, as you said before, could be a good measurement.
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, this is not something you can measure in a binary way.
Yeah.
If I give two examples, a new drug that has invented here at the university and that saves millions of lives of people suffering from HIV, well, that is quite measurable. X
Hmm.
patients have been saved; their lives have been saved. But if our law school has been very instrumental in some piece of legislation that has been changed and that has a large societal effect. How can you measure that? Yeah.
Yeah.
But the impact is there, but
Hmm.
only it is much more difficult to measure through KPIs.
So, what are the main changes have you seen in more than 20 years in your career in tech transfer?
Well, I would say quite some. To start with, when I started here, tech transfer was very much under the radar, I would say. Most universities had a tech transfer office, but that was about it. It was a matter of individuals doing it. If you take a look at the situation right now, everybody realizes that innovation, that transferring research results into society, that is key to our welfare. Yeah? So tech transfer is really on the radar of a lot of policymakers, of a lot of people. That has changed the profession also. Getting more attention is a good thing, but can also be a bad thing. You lose some flexibility from time to time. What I've also seen is that there has been a trend towards a more holistic approach. What do I mean? 20, 25 years ago, a lot of tech transfer offices were technology licensing offices. They were dealing with the patents and licensing of the patents. Today, it is more widely recognized that you need as well patenting and licensing, but also creation of spin-off companies, but also a department that takes care of the collaborations with existing companies. Yeah. A new research result might be seem to be feasible to be patented. After a while, it seems, well, no, that doesn't work. Then it might be the basis for a spin-off company. After a while, yeah, still it's not perfect. Well, the end result might be that a thing where you originally thought that the best route to the market was patenting and licensing might end up in some kind of a consulting mode. And that's not a bad thing, but you need all these chapters to be interacting with each other. In the past 20 years, I also noticed that there is a lot of professionalization. Um, Tech transfer offices are not the how shall I put it, the entity where people are promoted where the university cannot find a way out with. Sometimes in the past they were dumped in the tech transfer office because that's some kind of an easy parking route. Well, these kind of situations luckily don't occur anymore. Last but not least, and that's not a positive trend. If I take a look at what's happening over the last, let's say, 5 years, specifically on the continental Europe, I see a sharp increase of what I would call compliance. The requirements that are imposed upon us and a lot of other actors by the way, regarding GDPR, patient consent, export control, Nagoya Protocol, and I can go on and on and on and on. All a very valid cause. But if you see how stringent we are forced to comply with certain rules in continental Europe, if I compare that with quite some other regions, and again, I'm all in favor of GDPR, I'm all in favor of patient consent, but the combination of all the regulatory affairs that we are imposed, medical device regulation is another one, I can see that it starts to hamper innovation. People are quitting because of the heavy duties of compliance, and that's a shame, and that worries me.
Yeah, I think that what some people may not realize is that that takes a lot of time from doing actually the research, dealing with compliance. I mean,
It has several aspects. For example, if you take a look at what's happening in a tech transfer office, you need people with an entrepreneurial mindset. Yeah, you need people who like to see things born, who like to bring things to the market, who like to conclude arrangements with other stakeholders. Well, compliance in a lot of cases is exactly the opposite. It's ticking boxes, it's making sure that paperwork is filled out, etc., etc. So that's a difficult one. But also, when I take a look at the researchers themselves, if they have innovative ideas that do not reach the market, that are not even used because of regulatory affairs, that is very, very, very frustrating. And I have unfortunately already been faced with a lot of researchers, clinical researchers, but also others who say, "Look, I'm not going to bother anymore because I've put on the table already 3 inventions, and 3 times I see that the invention is good, people want to use it, but due to the heavy regulatory burden, it doesn't see the light of day. Sorry, and yeah, people give up, and that's a pity. That's a pity, and that is something that is threatening our innovative capacity in Europe, I'm afraid.
it's concerning. But speaking about innovation, in terms of IP, what fields do you see developing faster in the research performed at KU Leuven?
Mhm. That is a very time dependent answer. If the answer that I can give you right now will not be the same answer that I would give if you would have asked me this same question 7 years ago, for example. Research in itself, the focus of research is also influenced by the societal needs. So also the research in itself changes. We've had big focuses in the past on stem cell research, on, for example, right after 9/11, there was a big focus on everything dealing with security, for example. We've had a big period of nanotechnology that was, you can almost call it a hype at a given point in time. If you ask me the question today, um, in AI, really a lot is moving. Gene technology, gene therapy, and immunology in general. In particular, in this university, still, although it is not a new domain, drug discovery and small molecule drug discovery is a hot item, has been a hot item for quite some time, but still is today. Um, all kinds of recycling technologies. There's a lot happening in there, including, for example, sustainable mining. So that there are, not surprisingly, these are domains that also try to give an answer to societal needs today. By the way, some of the biggest successes we've had in the past were successes in segments that have become very hot, like 3D printing, for example, but where our university had already a very long track record in these domains before they became hot. Yeah. And if then at a given point in time the technology domain really becomes a point of attention, you have a lot to offer.
Mhm. Um, so, Paul, being as you are surrounded by such an innovative environment, I would like to know if there are any spin offs or startups or projects that you have been more attached to that perhaps you would like to talk about.
Being more attached to, I wouldn't say no. A parent should love all his children equally. No. Um, Given the fact that we are also a comprehensive university, there is a very wide variety of different kind of spin-offs and different domains, which I like. There are a series of spin-offs, though, that I think are a very nice illustration of the mission that we have, and one of them is Astrivax. Astrivax is active, is created last year, quite recently. It's active in the development of novel vaccines. For quite some vaccines, as you're probably aware already since decades, vaccines are being produced via fertilized eggs, which is not very um, easy to customize, which is unpredictable, etc. They have a complete novel platform to produce certain vaccines. And to cut a long story short, they can inject you with something, and it is within the body itself that the vaccine will be produced. So it's a completely different approach. Why do I like it? First of all, because the spin off was created based on years of really good research. And it was a team effort. So it's an illustration of what I mentioned before. Um, it does not only tackle the commercially interesting diseases like hepatitis B, but also rabies, for example, which is not a commercial disease, but really something that is of big societal importance. It can have a major influence, if everything succeeds, on the developing countries also, because in this technology, you will not need the cold chain anymore. Remember the mRNA vaccines of COVID, for example. They need to be stored in a cool place, otherwise they lose their potential. Well, obviously, in a lot of developing countries, this is really an issue. This issue is also not relevant anymore with this technology. So to me, it is a successful transfer of technology, not only addressing the commercial market, but also another market. And so to me, I was very pleased that when this spin-off was created recently, it raised right from the start 30 million, which for us was a record amount. So I was and I am really happy with this one.
I can imagine how happy you are and how proud you are of this spin-off. What do you think should be the roles of IP in universities?
Specifically in universities, to me, intellectual property is a tool. It's a tool to get the technology out. It's a tool to get the research results out. And in some domains, this is a tool you cannot do without. For example, drug discovery without intellectual property, it simply is impossible to get interesting parties in the market to further develop the technology. For some others, sociology, law school, etc., intellectual property is less relevant. You have copyright, of course, but in a lot of cases that is less relevant. So it's a technology to get it's a tool to get the technology out. It also has a signaling function in quite some cases. When we file a patent, for example, and the patent filing is published, at that point in time, we see that it has a signaling function for companies and other stakeholders to contact us. Maybe they are not even interested in the filing as such, but they see, okay, this group, this lab is dealing with this and this technology, and we would like to talk. So also that is for us important. Like publications, patent filings have a signaling function. Um, so for me, patents definitely, and certainly in a university setting, are not a goal in itself. And I come back to what I said earlier when it comes to indicators. The number of patent filings, the number of patent grants, is an indicator, but what matters to me is what happens with that patent afterwards. Has it led to new technologies? Has it led to new collaborations? Has it led to new products and services in the marketplace? And it definitely is not the highway to the quick buck. What you can sometimes see or hear if you talk with responsible persons that think, well, if we file enough, the money will follow quickly. Well, that is not true, and all statistics also show that that is not true.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really good way to put it. IP as a tool that has to be used, should be used, but of course not the final goal. I hear that congratulations are in order as you have been named the president of 10U for the next 6 months. Would you explain to our listeners what is 10U and what role as president, what does it entail?
Sure. 10U is the abbreviation of 10 universities, and it is an alliance of the tech transfer offices of 10 universities, 6 UK ones, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, Edinburgh, and Manchester, 3 US ones, MIT, Stanford, and Columbia, and then Leuven Research and Development, which is our tech transfer office. And the goal of the alliance is to exchange best practices, which is an ideal platform given the international constellation that we have. Exchange best practices, but also share these best practices. And 10U, we do that via 10U in a lot of ways. A recent example is the Use It Guide, which has been launched. The Use It Guide is a guide that gives a lot of recommendations for what to do and what not to do when creating spin-out companies. It was launched a couple of months ago and it has already been downloaded thousands of times. It was launched a couple of months ago in the presence of George Freeman, the Minister of Science, Innovation and Technology in the UK. And I think it really helps a lot of universities struggling a little bit. You know, what should we ask as a university when we create a spin-off company? What is fair to ask? The big merit of the Use It Guide is that it was created in consultation with the relevant stakeholders. So not only the universities, but also investors, for example. We organize webinars, we organize workshops. We have a future leadership program where we try to guide and coach people who can be future leaders in the profession. So there's a multitude of actions that are being undertaken. It's very driven by the members. It's very driven by the 10 universities and the team of 10U, obviously. So as a president, which is a rotating role indeed, as a president for the next 6 months, I will be the face of 10U, but also guide and help to steer all these different programs of 10U.
So it would be very interesting to get a vision or maybe an opinion from someone like you that has such an experience in this field about how do we foster innovation as a society.
Mhm. That's the $1 million question, of course. To a big extent, it's a cultural issue. So it's a matter of making sure that science is appreciated, and this sounds very logical, very easy or evident, but it is not, definitely in these times of fake news. I think this is something where the media and also social media have a big responsibility. So appreciation of science, it's also a cultural issue of appreciation of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. You don't need to create a company to have an entrepreneurial mindset. So very early on, even in primary schools or even kindergarten, as far as I'm concerned, making sure that initiatives are being rewarded, reward success, but also make sure that it is quite clear that failure is nothing to be ashamed about. And there's a pretty long way that we have to walk upon in that respect, definitely in continental Europe, where failures are not always appreciated by everyone. The role of the government here, I think the government needs to facilitate, needs to create an environment, tax wise, legal wise, administrative wise, that makes things possible. But the government should not steer the innovation. The government should not take over the role of innovation. That has to be done by society itself, I think. And in that respect, also, if I take a look at the history of the past 50 years within our own university, I think the role of role models can be really, really important here. Showing people, and by preference, people who the audience can relate to. If you talk to an audience of students, well, put an entrepreneurial student on the stage. Put not a person of 65 on the stage who lives in a world that is far away from the student. So put role models on the stage that have been successful or have failed in their innovative attempts, and that kind of, in my eyes, will do the trick in the long run. It's a continuous effort.
I really like what you just said about failure. I think that's um, a very important point. I completely agree with your views about seeing failure as something that you have to accept as part of the journey to success because it's about learning. So I would like to finish with this question that perhaps can help a lot of entrepreneurs. From your experience, what are the main reasons for a project or a spin off to succeed? Is there a recipe for success?
I really like a quote of Alexander Graham Bell, who once said, "Before anything else, preparation is the key to success." It probably is a bit of a cliche, but it is so much true. Before you start something, what are you going to do? What do you need in order to accomplish that? What are the hurdles that you might face? How can you encounter them? When you create a spin-off company, what I'm describing right now is the business plan. Yeah, just putting on paper your preparations in order to start. I'm all in favor of lean startups, but even lean startups should be prepared. So preparation is one. My former boss once said to me, well, the three most important things when you create a company or when you invest in a company are the team, and the team. Yeah, and he is very, very much right. What should be the capabilities of a good team? I think when you talk about spin outs and when you talk about even projects, two things come to my mind. First of all, in a university setting, you need to have enough affinity with the environment that you will end up in. For example, if we have a joint project between a university lab and a company, it is important to understand, to have enough affinity with how does a company work? What do they want? Doing research in a company is not the same as doing research in a university lab. Yeah, so you need to speak these two languages. Same goes for creating the creation of a spin-off company, obviously. And the second word is agility. When we talk about new technologies, new research results, um, it's a global world. Yeah, there will be completely unexpectedly, there will be scientific developments somewhere else in the world from a completely different angle that will make your technology obsolete. That is why it is so difficult to fully implement a business plan in a spin-off company, because you have your plans, but while implementing it, the world is changing. Yeah? So you will need to adapt. So the people that you will need, not only within a university, but also in managing a spin-off company, they will need to have a big degree of agility, making changes on the business plan that they had, being able to cope with changes, even reinvent themselves at a given point in time completely. And the same goes for projects that we execute from within the university together with industry, for example. Well, the scientific results will not only always be what we hope them to be. So there again, the agility to shift gears, the agility to adapt is absolutely crucial.
Thank you so much, Paul, for this time, for this great chat with us. You have given great advice, and it has been a pleasure to speak with you about all these topics. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Bye bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to IP Stories by 4IP Council. Visit our website on 4ipcouncil.eu to find out more and check out the links mentioned during this episode. If you liked it, remember to share and subscribe.